So, my name is Andrew McWilliams. So, in my art practice, I like to look at ways in which our conceptions of the world differ from the cold, hard, physical reality. And this has led me to some really odd and unexpected directions. And I'm going to take you through some works here. So, I took these photographs that you're looking at when I first came to New York in 2012. And these are of rocks on a dark studio floor. And they're coated with light. And rocks for me, they represent coldness and remoteness and lifelessness. So I decided to try and modify that perception. And I projected textures of rocks back onto rocks to try and mix in a sense of immediacy and agency. So here's a little clip of the process behind that, where I'm drawing light directly onto the rocks. And I have to say, I found it really incredibly visually engaging, to work with these textures in this way. It was a real experience. So I extracted that code that you're seeing there into a plugin and made it available for open frameworks. And the video that you're looking at here, you can see on the screen the interface, and then there's a projection interface. And as you move the items on the screen, you can see the movement over on the projected surface. So here's the plugin on GitHub for anybody that's interested in open frameworks. You can download it and start using it. Actually, I didn't mention, I have a very short presentation today. And so again, if anybody has any questions, don't feel that you have to wait. Like, raise your hand and I'll elaborate on some stuff. Because my presentation is about half the length of the others, and I'm happy to take a detour. So in this project that you're looking at here, Existential, I'm exploring depth video. And this is an incredible technology because you can shoot scenes from one position, and then you can re-render the scene from any other position in post-production, even from behind a wall. So this was shot in the winding tunnels of the London Underground, and I was thinking about how it is that we conceive of the built urban environment and mass cities, and the paradox of how being surrounded by millions of people can actually be very isolating. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think you can actually do it in real time, yes, but the tools that you'll be able to use will be limited. So the question was essentially around describing the process in a little more detail. So what that's using is a Kinect depth sensor, and you've got various versions of Kinects, and in this case I was using Kinect 1. And there was a group of people, mainly James, George, and Alexander Porter. And these guys created a toolkit called Rgb D Toolkit. And what that does is it allows you to connect a RGB camera, like a DSLR, for example, to a depth camera, and then sync them so that the two video streams, the RGB video stream and the depth video stream, can be overlaid. And so there's lots of examples of this online. I've done other depth videos where you have a very direct correlation. You can see these volumetric faces, and they've got fully colored in features and so on. In fact, they just had a installation of their work called Blackout, where they've done a very high-res version of this, and you're traveling on the tube, and you experience this in VR. You call it the subway here, right? So you're in a VR environment, and you're in the subway, and you can see all these volumetric figures walking around you, and you can go and listen to their thoughts. So it's a really interesting way of using that tech. So in this case, I've used this toolkit to shoot in the London Underground, coincidentally enough, And I've actually overlaid the RGB values with images of metallic surfaces. You know, I was really interested in the coldness and the remoteness again, right? Does that answer your question? Great. So here we have, in the summer of 2015, I was making sketches every day, and on the screen you're going to see some examples. But at that time, I had been dealing with a major life-changing event. And that's that I had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And that means that I had to think very carefully about my blood glucose levels, and I had to start injecting insulin frequently. And so this made me reflect a lot about the way we conceive of our own bodies. And in particular, I was thinking about blood. So I started wearing this body sensor, which broadcasts my blood glucose values, and I stitched that together with some open source tools. And I developed those sketches into this installation, which expresses what those numbers mean to me, my blood glucose values, and how emotionally, like every minute, I respond to them. Like a 91 is a healthy value, and you can see that. Very low values of like 53, they're potentially dangerous. And in this case, I can feel heartbeat and shaking and sweating and so on. And then high values like this cause a constriction in the flow of the animation. But high values don't actually give me any immediate symptoms, but what they do is lots of them over time accrue, and that can lead to a variety of body-wide complications. And this is diabetic 101, right? So I could list them all, but they're horrific. And the effect on me as a result is psychological. I use these numbers to keep myself at a healthy level. A little of the tech behind that, and please ask more questions depending on what I miss out. This is a Jetson TK1. This is Nvidia. You know, they've been making graphics cards for years, and they've become, you know, a leading player in that field. But they started recently putting their GPUs on PCBs. So GPUs, their graphics processing units, you know, like high horsepower processing units, onto small PCBs like this. And you know, they're miniaturizing the process, and they intend this for machine learning processes like self-driving cars. And this is a whole new direction for them, and it's working out very well for them at the moment. It was a great prescient move on their part. But on the flip side, for creative technologists like us, you know, you don't just have to use it for machine learning. Suddenly, you're using like a high horsepower GPU on a miniaturized electronic device. So that's why I formed it into an installation that was just standalone and could just run on the wall and be, you know, sit in a gallery, getting away from laptop screens, you know. Yes. Yes, I'm running open frameworks on that, yeah. There's, happily enough, as often is the case, an open source community had dedicated some time to it and made it a lot easier. The hardest part was discovering the open source community, because, you know, there's 20 different open source communities trying to do something like that, and it's like, oh, which one of them is actually going to be successful? Turns out I found one that was. So yeah. And then, so for me, the harder work for me, I guess, was, you saw the sketches earlier on, that was the process where I was leafing through different ideas. I was doing like new sketches every day, and I was also thinking about my bodily condition, and you know, you just saw all of these things come together. And so the graphic elements that you saw, the techniques behind them, I also extracted into plugins, and you can now use on open frameworks as well. So here's an image. Actually, first I'm going to show you this. Okay, so here on my arm, I have an implant, I suppose. It's not a permanent implant. I remove it once a week, but it is injected in under the skin. And so this is an option for people with diabetes, is to have a continuous glucose monitor. You know, you can check by pricking your blood, and people do that, and I do this every day. But having this on my, you know, pricked into my skin, gives me a continuous stream of numbers, which give me a sense of how I'm currently getting on. So if you go to that URL right now, if you have phones, and a few people have done this already, tiny.cc/blood glucose, you're going to be able to see my current blood glucose level, and you're going to be able to tell me that it's too high and that I should lower it or whatever, you know. But it's the point is that this device is broadcasting to my phone. My phone has an app called Xtrip, which is an open source community contributed app, Xtrip. Very, very helpful for people with diabetes. Much better than the proprietary apps, you know. And it also, oh, it's too high. That's it, yeah. What's the number?
I don't know, it's three
Oh,
yellow.
it's warning me that the last data it received was 21 minutes ago. So maybe there's a problem with the signal right now. So it's got this sound feature built in unless you disable it, because people use this for treatment. You know, like they need to know when there's like something that needs to be concerned about. But don't worry, I just checked it. My numbers are fine. So I'm not going to collapse. Thank you. Thank you. It's good to know you're all behind me on this. So yeah, Xtrip on the phone, open source community, it's a wonderful app. And it also, one of the features that it has is an integration with Night Scout, which is a cloud-based application. Now, unfortunately, because it's an open source cloud-based application, and this is the interface, you can't just like log in and use it like you do with a lot of cloud-based applications. I actually had to self-host, and so they just give you the code and you have to figure out how to get it running with a database and so on. So it's not as simple as it could be, but once you've got that running, you have a cloud-based endpoint that you can just check for new values. And that's what the installation does, is it just checks for new values and then renders a visualization based on that. So I've been living with this very personal condition, which I've had to acknowledge in order to deal with, in order to survive. And if anyone's running that, maybe you could turn your volumes down. Yeah, okay, cool. I can hear it somewhere. But, you know, so I had to acknowledge it in order to deal with it, in order to survive, literally. But, you know, I realized that all of us collectively have to deal with a very, very similar condition, like all of us. And it's just as bad, and it's just as urgent, and it's just as life-threatening. And it's climate change. So when you compare the two conditions, if you like, first you have to translate between the scales, two different scales. So you go from like my personal reaction up to our species-wide reaction to this condition. And there's something about how big and how all-encompassing climate change is that makes us say, yes, it's urgent, yes, it's existential, but collectively we allow it to slip down in our priority list. So whereas I and people with diabetes generally will want to learn about it very quickly and make daily lifestyle changes in order to, you know, keep that high on our priority list. You know, there's a difference in the way we conceive of the two. So we have these very different reactions, and, you know, the cold, hard physical reality is there, but our conceptions just lead us to act very differently. So these experiences, you know, made me think that what we need is to try and bridge these conceptions, and I think that all of us should try to treat climate change like the life-threatening emergency that it is. And so that's why I created this installation emergency room. So that's the last project that I wanted to show you, but I'll take any questions. Yes?
Yeah, so the emergency room, does that have any feedback like the diabetes product?
It doesn't link to diabetes specifically, because I guess in the way I see it, there are these, it's an incredibly analogous relationship between diabetes and climate change. You know, you have to make very fast short-term decisions within a certain time period. And if you don't make the correct lifestyle changes, even long before the symptoms show up, then you've already committed yourself to horrific outcomes. You know, so people with diabetes, the reason that we try and keep our numbers low isn't because it's going to give us any particular symptoms immediately, although they will accrue over time, is because we know what it means for our future. And all you have to do is spend, you know, leaf through the book, Think Like a Pancreas, which is a book for people with diabetes, and it lists in detail all of the things that can and likely will go wrong if you don't manage your diabetes. The list is as horrific for me as an individual as it is thinking collectively about the horrors of climate change. I mean, really. So there's all these links between the two, but for me, I was also interested in the analogy of the emergency situation. And given your organization, I know that you're already thinking that way. Like, we're actually in a climate emergency, and we're not acting like it. It's as though we've been diagnosed with diabetes, and we're saying to the doctors, look, I'll get to that next week. I mean, some of us are making really strong efforts, but collectively we're not. Collectively, we've gone in the exact wrong direction. It's very unhealthy, and we're locking in horrific outcomes. So, you know, this is incredibly deep and difficult subject matter, but for me, the resonance between the two ideas was very strong. We're in an emergency room, and, you know, I'm trying to suggest that we start acting more like it. Oh, yeah, how the installation works. So this is a 12-screen installation. When you walk in the room, the first thing you see is this beeping heart monitor. And this was installed down at HarvestWorks, and they have a wonderful sound system with several different speakers, and so we were able to have a very surround sound immersive environment. The room is flooded with red light. So you walk in, you see the beeping heart rate, you can hear it very loudly, and you can hear the sound of breathing. And I actually worked with a really good voice actor to record this breathing sound, and we tried to work with him to give the sense that he was in an emergency room. So that was his like what he was tasked with is like, you're in an emergency room and you're lying on a bed waiting for an operation, and that was the context that I tried to give him. And so you can hear that very loudly, and those are the constants, is the beeping and the emergency breathing. And then the other sounds and images that you see in here are on the screens. You see images of activists trying to shut down fossil fuel projects. You see images of climate-related chaos. So you saw some of them there with, you know, like glaciers shrinking and so on. And you see images of people actually from New York during and shortly after Hurricane Sandy, talking about their personal experiences of the extreme weather. And these video sequences, over time, there's a repeating narrative that flows through it. Every about 10 minutes that repeats, but the videos themselves the sequences don't repeat. They're picked semi-randomly based on what's the current narrative. And so this is something I've done with a lot of installations now, where there's a pulsation over like a 10-minute period or a longer period, and then there's noise in the shorter term. So the idea is that it's telling a story, but it can surprise you. It can suddenly select something that you didn't expect. And I thought that was important, especially in a story as large as this, is that we have these different themes, but that they intersect with one another. Yeah, I didn't really have any full control over that, which is always, like, it's exactly what I want out of my installations, but it's also difficult because it's like you're handing over control, you know. Yeah, so aside from the themes, there was one other component, which was that it sort of expanded and contracted. So there were moments where it was relatively sparse and the heart rate monitor actually went down and it was a slow beep, and that was more of a contemplative time. And then there were other moments, and certain footage was more likely to show during these moments, where it was, the heart rate was quickening, the volume was increasing, and there was more chaos. And so it's trying to give a space to recognize the power of these issues, but then have a space to contemplate it as well.
Okay, so you've talked before about how just playing around with whatever you want to play around with, like open frameworks and like multi-channel installations, has led you to ideas for these installations and projects. What are you working on right now?
Actually, So I guess this was the last major project that I did, and I think what you're referring to is when we look back at those sketches, you know, when I'm ready to start something new, sketching I think is the absolute way to do it, and in particular daily sketching where you keep having to recycle, you know, and a lot of people use that technique, and I really like it. I had a whole platform where I would write a sketch and then hit a publish button, and it would generate a GIF and upload it to a website. You can actually go to that website. If you go to sketchpad.jaya.net, Jahya, you'll see like an archive of all these sketches. Right now, I'm not working on any of that stuff. So I'm working on programmatic, you know, we're working on the arts residency and other things right now, but the next art project that I'm hoping to pick up this fall is to actually take this further. So right now it's a heart rate monitor, and that was based on a recording of a heart rate and a recording of breath. But I'm really interested in the possibilities of immediacy when you bring those things in, you know, in real time. So you know, I have a real-time blood glucose sensor. I was interested in how would it change the experience if there was a real-time ECG. And also, I'm really interested in developing the content, because I think that this story is such a large and powerful one. The 3 themes I selected on that occasion were linked to New York because it was being shown in New York. But there are so many different ways that you can take that narrative. So I'm really interested in digging into more issues related to climate change and seeing other ways that they link back to health. So yeah, I'm going to dig further into this. Okay, thank you all for listening to me, and it's Ellen Perlman next.